So, how to travel to Japan and do it the right way. Hello, everyone. My name is Mark, and today we're doing episode 2 of our Training in Japan series. We're going to be covering essentially what preparations you'll need to do your first trip. We will focus more on preparations. In the next 2 episodes, we'll be discussing training in seminars and in dojos, respectively. So, let's get started. First point, logistics. Travel cheap. And by that, I mean there's different options depending on where you're leaving from to come to Japan. But regardless of options, you want to be careful about not traveling in high seasons, which are going to be a little bit different than your standard, say, Western high seasons. You have Cherry Blossom, Golden Week, Silver Week, end of year, that are all going to be affecting your cost. And in certain cases, it's going to be low season when everywhere else it will be basically high season, or it's going to be less expensive, relatively speaking. So you'll want to basically do some research on that, just to make sure that you avoid paying a lot for a trip that may that may have been cheaper if you would have picked a different starting in and leaving date. Find a cheap place to stay. It's changed a lot since since I've come to Japan. But if you can, try to find a hotel or accommodation where they actually don't have a English website, or that's really tailored for Japanese people. Now, I'm assuming that you've learned a little bit of Japanese, right? You've watched episode 1. If not, shame on you. Go back to episode 1 and start the proper way. But joking aside, it'll be just a different experience. International hotels or hotels that are accommodating for foreigners generally tend to have a different experience. If you pick some place where it's breakfast included, for instance, you're probably going to get more foreign, Western breakfast than a Japanese breakfast, things like that, and it's generally going to be cheaper. So you'll basically save money and get a better experience. If you can afford a more expensive hotel and accommodation, that's great. There's interesting options. It's keeping in mind that you're probably not going to spend a whole lot of time at the hotel anyway. You can do it, but it's not necessarily the best investment. Look for one near or with an onsen, so a hot spring or sentos or public bath. It's kind of nice after training to be able to go and relax there. You do make sure that they have a schedule that will match your training schedule. So if you basically end up training until 7, 9, or 10 in the evening, and then you go back, and then the place is closed, it's a little bit pointless, right? Use Google Maps to look for cheap local places for eating. So basically, by cheap local place, I mean surrounding the spot where you're gonna stay. It's cheaper. Local places are smaller, more casual. It's easier to potentially just kind of randomly make friends and acquaintances. And it'll be just as delicious most of the time. You might actually even end up, depending on your appetite, you might actually end up stopping at 2 or 3 different places, and it's still going to be relatively cheap. And just, kind of, you're going to find yourself enjoying a lot of the local food like that. You can always, if you, again, I'm trying to aim at this video at people who have, potentially a limited budget, but if you have a little bit more money, there are some places you can go to that are going to be, more expensive, obviously, and, absolutely amazing, great experience. I'll try to put some ideas in the comments for that. In the video description for that. Get a JR train pass. So the JR train pass is essentially a all you can travel train pass for the JR lines, which essentially are going all across Japan. Now, the JR pass itself will generally be limited to a geographical region, so the Kanto or Kansai area, for instance. But and it will not cover the local train system. So, for instance, if you're in Tokyo for training, it won't cover the Toei lines. It won't cover the various privately run train lines also. But it's good to have the JR train pass because it will allow you to travel by Shinkansen. Now, be careful because you won't be able to get on any Shinkansen. If I recall correctly, you'll basically be able to take a unreserved seat. There are reserved seats where basically you have your own seat number and row. An unreserved seat is basically wagons where you're gonna just go in and sit down and pick a free seat. So if you do want to do a little bit of travel, basically for a 2-week trip, if you do one round trip to Osaka, for instance, from Tokyo, I think you'll pretty much pay the JR rail pass by just doing that trip. So every other traveling you're going to be doing is essentially going to be basically for free from there onward. Next one, get a Suica. So Suica is I don't have it on me. But basically, I'll put a picture in the video. It's basically a card that you can charge to make your traveling easier for all the other train lines where you're not going to be able to use your JR Rail Pass. It's also something you can use to put pretty decent amount of money, and you can use it to pay at other locations and places. So, for instance, if you go to the corner store, called Kombini in Japanese, you're going to be able to basically use the Suica also to pay. There's vending machines almost every 10 meters in the country where you can buy drinks. You can also often use that card to pay. It just kind of makes it easier and more convenient for a whole lot of reasons. So you should consider basically getting one. It's normally 500 yen to get one, so about $5 US. And it will be valid for, I think it's 5 to 10 years. So if you do trips in the future, you're going to be able to reuse the same card as well. Confirm how long you can stay. So this will depend on your nationality. In general, the rule of thumb is going to be you can stay for 3 months. But it can be shorter or longer. So for instance, I think people from Switzerland can go up to 6 months. And I don't have examples of people that are limited for shorter in mind, but I do remember seeing on the I think immigration website that you have some countries that are limited to 1 or 2 months. So you do not want to overstay. I know people work related, not Budo related, thankfully, but I know people that have overstayed. They were lucky and they got away with a slap on the finger. So basically, they were taken away in a very, very drab room and told very sternly not to do it again. But, there are also stories of people basically, just not being able to come to Japan again, ever, and being persona non grata. If you are interested in traveling to Japan for the purpose of training, that would be quite an inconvenience. So plan accordingly. Additionally, you might have heard of people doing the Korean revolving trip between Japan and Korea. So basically, they stay 3 months in Japan, go for a couple of weeks or a couple of days in Korea, and then come back to Japan to train some more. Do not do that. Now, if you are eager to train in Japan and to extend your training period of Japan, I totally understand. But you don't want to do that. Basically, there are better ways of doing this. You will eventually get in trouble, if not the first time, the second time, and you're probably going to be stuck with having to pay extra fees to go back to your home country or to Korea. And I'm not even sure if you would be able to go back to Korea from there. So you might actually end up with a pretty salty bill to pay to kind of, go back to some other place. With that said, do try to stay as long as you can. I would say that 2 months is a good number. That's basically the amount of time that I stayed on my first serious trip. I did a first 2 weeks trip prior to that. It was interesting, and I did a little bit of training, but 2 weeks is essentially 6, depending on how many dojos you can go to. It's probably going to be 6 to 8 training sessions. So it's not a whole lot, but it's a start. If you can stay for a month, you do get a little bit more, like you kind of get a full training cycle with people, coming and going for training purposes. 2 months is nice because you're also going to basically account for any holidays where the dojo is going to be closed. So you're going to get a lot more training, and again, you're kind of going to see a little bit more the dojo life cycle, basically. It's of course okay to travel and do some sightseeing. I strongly recommend that you do so. Japan is a wonderful place. It's a beautiful place. If it's your first trip, you're probably going to want to stick to the more obvious spots. Tokyo itself, Osaka, Nara, Kamakura is basically a day trip from Tokyo. So, if you want to go see some beach, some nice places, the Daibutsu over there. On a second trip, you might want to go a little bit more north or south. Kagoshima, Kyushu, beautiful places over there. Hokkaido, but also Aomori and surrounding areas. Beautiful places. A lot of great nature. Do it, right? However, I've seen people who would basically come to train to the dojo and say, like, I want to be serious about it, and then they kind of disappear for a week and a half for an extended trip. If you're going to do that on a 1 month trip, it's kind of, it's kind of weird a bit, right? If you do a 2 month trip, then you get a little bit more leeway. If you say you're going to be leaving for a week to travel a bit, I think people will understand a little bit more easily. But make sure that you don't sacrifice too much of training for the traveling as well, right? It's a balancing act, but you also want to be taken seriously at whatever dojo you're going to be training, right? People are going to make accommodations for you to be able to train and be comfortable in training. So, let them know of your schedule if you're not going to be coming for a little while, and try to make that schedule reasonable. Point number 2, communications. Google Map will be a lifesaver. When I came to Japan, smartphones were rather new. I didn't have one, so I had to print maps. And a printed map is far less useful to you than an interactive map that basically includes GPS. Especially Tokyo can be extremely hard to travel. Back streets don't go at right angle, and it can get really confusing to figure out where you're at. So make sure you have your smartphone. Make sure you have a roaming plan. You might want to consider data-only SIM cards that can be purchased online for use in Japan, or you can try to get something at the airport. There's some, like in many airports around the world, you can acquire SIM cards. Just make sure that it will fit on your phone, obviously. Make sure that technology-wise, if you have a 4G or 5G phone, probably it's not going to be an issue, but anything older will probably be problematic. And of course, make sure that you have a converter for your phone so to be able to charge it. Once you arrive in Tokyo, you'll probably need to go to Akihabara if you want to buy one, and if you haven't brought one with yourself. So, make sure you bring one. If you forgot to pack one in your luggage, try to get one at the airport instead of waiting until you're in Tokyo to do so. Next point, contact the dojo ahead of time. Do not show up unannounced. I repeat, do not show up unannounced. and basically contact the dojo well in advance before you leave, after being introduced and recommended, ideally. Again, going back to episode 1, this is one of the reasons why you want to train in local dojo prior to considering to make a trip. Generally speaking, you will need to reach out in Japanese, especially if you're reaching out on your own device without a recommendation. I think Branch Dojo Chief generally do their communications in English. If I sometimes help with that. And if you're introduced by one, you'll probably be okay to do your introduction in English. But if possible, do it in Japanese. Do your homework. Don't ask questions that are readily available online. So if there's a website for the dojo you're going at, make sure that you thoroughly read the content of the website. Be very, 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 very polite. Even if it's in English, whomever is going to do the translation of your English message will know the difference between a polite and an impolite message. And chances are, the teacher, the head instructor, or the headmaster of the school, it will know the difference between a well-polished, well-crafted message and a polite one, and one that's been written, like if it was in the back of a napkin. Be polite. If you can't handle that, you're probably not going to do well in a Japanese dojo to begin with. Don't make announcements. Make requests. Example. I am considering a trip to Japan for the following dates. May I join the seminar training during that period? I am visiting Japan on the following dates. Would it be possible to come for a visit? In parentheses, kengaku. If so, when would be the best dates to do so? Inquiring about demonstration in Inbu as well. So if you are going to go for a training session or kengaku, depending on whether it will be the first time you go to the dojo and you're basically coming without a recommendation, or you're basically coming with one, there's a certain time period during the years where you're going to have demonstration of classical martial arts in Japan, and the dojo you will be going to might participate in those. So it's good training to be able to go and watch those demonstrations. It's great to see Daito-ryu. It's also great to see other classical martial arts that are potentially less known than Daito-ryu. It's a great learning experience. It'll broaden your horizons as far as your world of Budo is concerned. And stay in touch. So once you're about to leave, send a message. I am leaving. I'll be arriving on this date at this time at this airport. Once you land, shortly after, maybe send a quick message. I've safely landed. I'll be going to the hotel now, and I look forward to meeting you at whatever date you've basically agreed on with in your prior messaging. It's some people are basically going to stop their communications after getting the approval. It's kind of rude. If you're going to basically show up later, it's a good idea to basically make sure that people, to remind them that you will be, that you are on your way and that you'll be showing up at some point. Next point, make sure that your things are in orders. Make sure that you do not need any special paperwork before entering Japan. Generally, you shouldn't need any. Just make sure that is the case. Make sure you have travel insurance covering injuries. You're going in a dojo. Injury is a possibility, unfortunately. Make sure that you have insurance for yourself, right? The dojo is not really going to have insurance. That's not a problem, but make sure you have personal insurance as well. Do you know how to travel from and to the airport on your first and last day? On at least one of my trip, I made the mistake of miscalculating, and then after that, it was basically just chaos to try to figure out a way to go to the airport, and I was lucky enough to make the plane just on time. You do not want to do that. It will cost you to basically get an extra plane ticket if you miss your plane. Make sure, and it's not necessarily trivial to navigate the railroad system to go to the airport. Preparing for that also will make you realize that you might not need to use the Narita Next, so basically the Narita Express. There are likely cheaper travel options in terms of railroad travel to go from and to the airport. If you're going to be staying around the Ueno area, for instance, there's the Keisei line has an express between Ueno and Narita Airport. There's the Sobu Kaisuku line, the Sobu Rapid line that travels basically between Narita and Shinagawa, from which you could go and change train line to go to Haneda if that's your airport. And all of those, and depending on those options, you might actually be able to get something very comfortable. You might even be able to get a private seat, like on the Narita Express. If you use a green car on the Sobu Rapid line, for instance, you basically gonna pay about a third of what it would cost you for the next. So do look for those options. Do you need to submit any documents for registration purpose at the dojo? So, for instance, when I registered at the Shinbukan Dojo, I had to bring a passport size picture, I think a proof of identity, and I had to sign a pledge, and I of course had to pay the registration fee and the fee for the first month of training. So most dojos are going to be probably something along those lines, but your mileage may vary. So inquire about what you will need on your first day when you show up. Make sure that you have the documentation ready. If you can, it's a good idea to, and if you're going to have to pay on the first day for the registration, stop at any combini, and you're going to see that they sell those envelopes, small size, that you can use basically for payment purposes. Just put, whatever money you're going to give them in it. Put your name on the envelope, and you're going to be able to give that instead of just giving the money right out. It's going to be a little bit more. Handling money is not really something that looks good in general. So to be able to pass it on like this feels a little bit better, culturally speaking. If you pay with fees, use clean, newish bills if possible. If you can't, normally if you go and get money exchange either at your departing airport or at the airport you're going to be landing, you should be able to get some relatively new bills. Use those instead of old bills. It's also custom, not whatever you give and the condition it is in Japanese culture can and will be perceived as basically a sign of how much you actually care about the person you are giving this to. So you want to be careful about that as well. And finally, come bearing gifts. What you give will be a reflection of your personality and attitude. So, don't go at the airport you're leaving from and buy some token things for like the head instructor or headmaster, right? Put some thoughts in it. It doesn't have to be expensive, but put some thoughts in it. It might be something that has historical meaning in your home culture, for instance. It could be something that would be very hard to get for a Japanese person, right? But put some thoughts in it, right? Don't buy something random to give to people. It's probably a good idea to bring something for the teacher. And then on subsequent trips, you're probably going to know a few people a little bit more closely, and then bringing gifts for those people will also be a good idea, right? I know some people, and I personally am in that category, will kind of just buy a whole bunch of stuff that's well, when I'm going when I'm going leaving Japan and I'm going say to a foreign seminar, or if I am coming back to Japan from like visiting relatives in Canada, I'll generally buy a whole bunch of stuff because there's really, especially coming back from Canada, I have to buy gifts for people at work. I need to buy gifts for people at the dojo. I need to buy gifts for relatives, friends, family. It's a lot of gifts to go about, and to think about each and every individual person can be a bit difficult. So obviously, people like Sensei, I'm going to buy something really nice. But I'm also going to buy in bulk, right? And I'm going to try to buy again things that are going to be hard to find in Japan and culturally relevant to Canadian culture. So you can do that. I would recommend doing so. But then again, if you're traveling on the cheap, you'll want to be mindful of your luggage weight. So it's fine if you want. Sorry, if you want to balance those concerns with bring gifts for a whole bunch of people. And that's it for now. So hopefully those points are going to give you a good starting point for preparing for a trip to Japan for the purpose of training. Maybe one last point. Do not forget Yodogi. That actually happened on my third trip, I think, at a seminar, and I had actually I didn't forget the dogi. I had the dogi in my luggage, but my luggage got lost, and I was going at a 1 week seminar, and I ended up basically having to borrow a dogi that was twice my size. It was a bit humiliating. It's a good idea to keep one of your dogi in the hand luggage, basically. Just in case your luggage gets lost. The last thing you want to do is kind of lose training time if you're going to be traveling for the purpose of training. So, you should consider your training gear, and of course that includes your dogi, as, essentials, and make sure that you have at least one of them in your hand luggage so that you're going to have that, right? In the next few episodes, we're going to be discussing training in seminars versus training in dojos. So the next episode will be training in seminar. We'll discuss what that involves, what kind of experience you can expect. And then in the following episode, I'll be discussing training in a dojo. That's a generally different experience. And hopefully both those videos will help you understand what you can expect from each training context and what you can expect to gain. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down in the comments. Thank you for your time, and until next time.